They didn't cry when my grandparents died. They didn't hug me. They didn't even ask if I was okay. The only words my parents said to me that day were, "So, when do we get our share?" That was the moment I realized my parents never saw me as their child. To them, I was only a wallet waiting to open. Omi sat quietly by the graveside, her eyes fixed on the fresh soil that now covered her grandparents. They had been the only ones who ever made her feel safe, the only ones who never judged her, never shouted at her, never asked her to be someone she wasn't. The priest's words drifted in the air, but Omi barely heard them. Her heart was heavy, her chest tight with pain. She wished she could hold their hands one more time, hear their voices one more time. She turned her head slightly, hoping to see her parents beside her, sharing her grief. But instead of tears on their faces, she saw something else. Zako and Lyra leaned close to each other, whispering, their eyes sharp and restless. Their lips moved quickly, and Omi could tell they were not praying, not mourning. They were counting, calculating. In that moment, she felt a sting deeper than the loss itself. She had lost her grandparents, and now she realized her parents weren't really there for her either. The mourners slowly left, one by one. Neighbors patted Omi on the shoulder, offered quick words of comfort, then drifted away. Soon, the graveyard grew quiet, and only the sound of the wind remained. Omi stayed, sitting on the cold ground, tears rolling down her cheeks. She wanted to sit there forever, because leaving meant accepting that her grandparents were gone. But her father's shadow fell over her. Zako leaned down, his face hard, not softened by grief. His voice was low but sharp. "You know they left you money," he muttered. "Don't be selfish, Omi. We raised you." Omi blinked at him, stunned. She searched his face for any sign of love, for any sign that he was saying this out of care. But his eyes were cold, filled only with hunger. Her mother stood behind him, arms folded, nodding silently as if agreeing with every word. In that moment, Omi's heart cracked again. Her grandparents were not even gone a full day, yet her parents were already stripping away her chance to grieve. The love she had hoped to lean on in her darkest hour was nowhere. All she saw in their eyes was greed. She lowered her head, wiping her tears quickly before they noticed. She didn't want them to see how deeply they had hurt her. She thought about the warm hugs her grandmother used to give, the gentle advice her grandfather whispered to her at night. They always told her she was precious, that she mattered. And now, sitting in front of their grave, she realized just how different her parents were. Her grief no longer felt like hers alone. It had been stolen, twisted into something ugly. The people who were supposed to protect her were already trying to take from her. For the first time, Omi understood that she was truly alone. And that thought cut her deeper than death itself. A week after the funeral, Omi found herself sitting in a small office that smelled of old books and paper. The lawyer sat behind a wooden desk, holding a folded document in his hands. Family members filled the room, some curious, some pretending to care, but Omi's mind was racing. Her palms were sweaty as she thought about what her grandparents might have written. She wasn't expecting riches. She only wanted their love to echo in words, something to remind her she had been special to them. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. His voice was steady, formal, but each word felt heavy in the air. "To our beloved granddaughter Omi, we leave everything. The house, the farmland, and the inheritance totaling $26 million. The room went silent for a second, then sharp gasps spread around. Omi froze, her heart pounding so fast she could barely breathe. She wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Everything? To her? She turned her head slowly and saw the faces of her parents. Zako's jaw dropped, then tightened quickly as if he had just discovered treasure. Lyra's eyes sparkled, but it wasn't pride. It was hunger. They weren't looking at her like a daughter who had just been given responsibility. They were looking at her like she was holding a bag of gold they couldn't wait to snatch. Omi's chest tightened. She had dreamed that maybe, just maybe, this moment would make her parents finally look at her with love. Instead, all she saw was greed burning in their eyes. The rest of the will mentioned a few instructions about maintaining the land and keeping it in the family, but Omi barely heard it. Her mind was drowning in a mix of shock and fear. She wanted to cry, but she held herself still, her face calm even as her heart shook. When the reading was over, people whispered and murmured, some congratulating her, others already questioning how she would manage such wealth. Omi left the office quietly, clutching her bag like it could protect her from the world. That night, as she sat alone in her grandparents' house, her parents finally came to her. Lyra's voice was sharp, colder than the night breeze. "You will hand it to us," she said. "We deserve it more than you." Zako nodded beside her, his eyes already imagining the money in his hands. Omi's lips trembled, but she stayed silent. In her heart, something broke. She had thought this inheritance might make her parents proud of her. She thought they would finally see her worth, but they didn't see her as their child. They only saw her as prey. The next morning, Omi was still lying in bed, her eyes swollen from crying through the night. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandparents' faces and then her parents' cold stares from the will reading. Her chest was heavy, her mind restless. She wanted to believe her parents would calm down, maybe even talk to her gently. But before the sun had fully risen, a loud knock rattled her door. It wasn't a knock of care. It was a demand. Zako pushed the door open without waiting for her reply. His face was stern, his steps heavy. He stood at the foot of her bed, looking at her like she was not his daughter, but someone standing in the way of his dreams. "We've already told people," he said, his tone sharp and final. "That money belongs to us as a family. Don't embarrass us." His words didn't carry love or concern. They carried warning. In his hand was a folded paper. He tossed it on the blanket near her legs. "Here," he added. "This is what we need first." Omi picked it up with trembling fingers and slowly unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the list. A brand new mansion in the city, luxury cars, shares in a company, jewelry, businesses they wanted to start. It went on, each line filled with greed. Her throat tightened as she realized not one word on the list mentioned her needs, or her future. She looked up at her father, her voice small and weak, but filled with hurt. "So all I am to you is your bank?" For a second, she hoped he would soften, that he would deny it, that he would at least remind her she was still his daughter. But instead, Zako sneered, his eyes narrowing with annoyance. "Don't act ungrateful," he said. "If not for us, you wouldn't even exist." Those words pierced Omi's heart deeper than any knife could. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what she truly meant to them. Nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. She stared at the man who was supposed to protect her, guide her, love her. All she saw was someone ready to strip her of everything, even her dignity. Her mother stood silently at the doorway, arms crossed, nodding in agreement with every word Zako spoke. The silence from her mother hurt almost as much as her father's cruelty. Omi lowered her gaze back to the paper, her tears dripping onto the ink. They didn't notice her pain and they didn't care. For them, she was no longer a daughter. She was just a wallet waiting to be opened. And in that moment, Omi realized how alone she truly was. Omi held the paper in her hands, the list of demands that her father had given her. Her chest felt heavy, and every part of her wanted to scream, to ask them why they couldn't just love her for who she was. But she didn't. She lifted her eyes and looked at her father's hard face, then at her mother's cold stare. Slowly, she forced herself to nod. "Okay," she whispered softly, adding a faint smile as if she agreed. "I'll handle it." Her voice was calm, but inside she was breaking into pieces. Her parents seemed satisfied with her answer. Zako smirked, convinced he had won, while Lyra gave a short nod before turning away. They left the room, already speaking about what they would buy first, not even noticing the tears that filled their daughter's eyes. When the door closed behind them, Omi sat still, her hands trembling on her lap. She had given them no fight, no argument, but it wasn't weakness. It was survival. Her grandparents' voices echoed in her heart, voices filled with love and wisdom. "Strength is not in shouting, Omi. Strength is in waiting for the right moment." She could almost hear her grandfather saying it by the fire, his warm eyes resting on her. She remembered her grandmother's gentle hands patting her shoulder whenever she felt small, whispering, "Patience protects you more than anger ever will." Those memories wrapped around her like a shield, keeping her from drowning in despair. That night, the house was quiet. Omi walked through the old rooms of her grandparents' home, her fingers brushing along the shelves filled with books and memories. She entered the study where her grandfather used to spend long hours writing letters and keeping records. The room still smelled faintly of paper and ink. Sitting at the wooden desk, Omi opened a drawer she had never touched before. Inside, she found a small box filled with letters addressed to her. Her hands shook as she unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was familiar, her grandmother's soft script. The words felt like warm hands holding her heart. Letter after letter, her grandparents reminded her of her worth, of the love they had for her, of their faith that she would grow strong even in a world that could be cruel. One line in particular made her stop. Her grandmother had written, "Don't waste love on those who cannot love you back." The words pierced her soul. All her life, Omi had begged her parents with her heart, hoping they would see her, value her, love her. But maybe she had been chasing something that didn't exist. For the first time, as she sat in the study with those letters spread before her, she allowed herself to think a dangerous thought. Maybe she didn't need her parents' approval anymore. Maybe the love her grandparents left her was enough. For the first time, she felt a quiet strength rising inside her. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of rich food. Omi's parents had planned a grand dinner, inviting relatives, neighbors, and even people they rarely spoke to. Tables were set with expensive dishes, drinks flowed freely, and everyone came dressed in their best clothes. To the guests, it looked like a celebration of success. But for Omi, sitting quietly at the corner of the long table, it felt like a stage built to show off something that wasn't theirs. Her parents moved through the crowd with pride, their voices loud and filled with excitement. They spoke about plans for businesses, new houses, and cars. They described the future as if it already belonged to them. "We are blessed," Zako declared, raising his glass high. "Our family is entering a new chapter." People cheered and clapped, their faces glowing with admiration. Omi's hands tightened around her fork as she listened. Every word made her heart sink deeper. Throughout the night, her parents didn't once mention her by name with love. They didn't speak of her as their daughter. They spoke of her inheritance as if it were their achievement, their reward. Whenever someone praised them, they accepted it with smiles, never correcting the lie. Omi sat still, her face calm, though inside she felt smaller and smaller. Then came the moment that cut her the most. Her mother, Lyra, stood up with a wide smile and lifted her cup. The room grew quiet as everyone waited for her toast. She cleared her throat and said loudly, "To the wealth our daughter owes us." The words echoed through the hall. People clapped, laughed, and raised their glasses high. Some even turned to look at Omi with approving nods, as if she should be proud of such a statement. But Omi's face burned. Her cheeks grew hot, not from pride but from shame. Not shame for herself, but for them, her parents. She couldn't believe they would say such words in front of so many people, exposing their greed so openly. She felt her stomach twist as the crowd cheered, blind to the truth. To them, she was only a girl sitting quietly in the shadow of her parents' loud voices. No one noticed the pain in her eyes. No one cared about the weight on her shoulders. In that moment, Omi realized something that froze her heart. It didn't matter to her parents if she was hurt, humiliated, or crushed under the burden. To them, she was invisible. The inheritance was the only thing they saw, the only thing they cared about. And as the guests laughed and clapped around her, Omi sat in silence, carrying her shame like a heavy stone, while her parents celebrated a fortune they believed was already theirs. The house was tense that morning, the air heavy with unspoken words. Omi had been quiet for days, moving softly through the halls, her mind carrying the weight of a decision she knew she had to make. Her parents were growing impatient, demanding answers, demanding money. She could hear them talking loudly in the living room, arguing about which car to buy first, which mansion would be big enough to show off their new status. Omi clutched a sealed envelope in her hands, her heart pounding. Today was the day she would finally face them. She stepped into the room slowly, her parents turning toward her with hungry eyes. Zako's face lit up, confident that his daughter had finally given in. Lyra leaned forward in her chair, a thin smile curling on her lips. Without a word, Omi held out the envelope. "Here," she said softly. Her voice carried no fear, only calm resolve. Zako snatched it from her hand like a man grabbing treasure. His fingers tore through the seal quickly, his eyes already gleaming as if he could see piles of money before him. But the moment he pulled out the paper and read the words, his face changed. His brow furrowed, his lips pressed tight, and then his jaw clenched with fury. It wasn't a check. It wasn't money. It was a letter from the lawyer confirming that Omi had locked the entire inheritance in a trust that only she controlled. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Lyra's voice broke through, sharp and shrill. "How dare you betray us?" she shouted, her hands shaking with rage. "We are your parents." Her voice cracked like a whip, but Omi didn't flinch. She stood taller than she ever had before, her eyes clear and steady. "Parents protect," Omi said firmly. "Parents love, parents guide. But you two, you only take. You see me as nothing but money. So no, you get nothing." Her words fell heavy in the room, each sentence carrying years of hidden pain. Zako's face twisted, red with anger. His fists clenched as if he wanted to shout back, but no words came. Lyra's mouth opened and closed, her voice caught in her throat. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. The neighbors in the next room, the relatives sitting nearby, even the children playing outside seemed to pause as if the whole world had stopped to hear Omi's voice. For the first time in her life, she had spoken without fear. She had faced the two people who were supposed to love her the most, and she had told them no. Her heart was racing, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, but she didn't look away. The room was frozen, her parents staring at her as if they no longer recognized their own daughter. And in that silence, Omi felt something powerful rise within her: freedom. The days after Omi said no were not peaceful. Her parents were furious, and their anger turned into something darker. They could not accept that their own daughter had refused them, so they began to attack her in another way. They started whispering into the ears of neighbors, cousins, and anyone who would listen. "Omi is cursed," they said. "She used witchcraft on her grandparents so they would leave her everything." Lyra spoke with tears in her eyes, pretending to be a victim. Zako nodded along, telling everyone how ungrateful Omi was, how heartless she had become. The words spread quickly, faster than fire. Soon, people in the village who once greeted Omi with warm smiles began to look at her with suspicion. Old friends stopped visiting. Women at the market, who had always welcomed her with laughter, now turned their backs. When she tried to buy food, they crossed their arms and said, "We don't sell to greedy people." Children who used to play near her grandparents' house now whispered as she passed. Some shouted cruel names, repeating the lies their parents had told them. Omi felt the weight of it pressing down on her. She walked through the streets, feeling eyes burning into her back. She sat alone in the evenings, the silence of the house louder than ever before. Her heart ached not only from her parents' betrayal, but from the way the whole community had turned against her. It would have been easy to scream, to fight back, to tell everyone the truth. But Omi remembered the lessons her grandparents had left her. Her grandfather's voice came back to her, gentle but strong. "The storm always tries to destroy the tree, Omi. But if the roots are deep, the tree will not fall." Her grandmother's words echoed too. "When people throw stones, don't throw them back. Use them to build your path." These memories wrapped around her like a cloak, reminding her who she was. At night, when tears slipped down her face, Omi whispered to herself, "They want me to break. They want me to fall to my knees and beg. But I will not give them that gift." She repeated it until the words became her shield. Each day, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She no longer tried to defend herself to those who had already chosen to believe lies. She walked to the market even when she knew no one would sell to her. She looked into the eyes of neighbors who whispered and greeted them politely, refusing to let bitterness take her heart. The storm around her grew stronger, but Omi chose silence, not weakness. Her silence was strength, her patience was power. She knew storms did not last forever, and when the clouds cleared, the truth would remain. For now, she would endure, because breaking was exactly what her parents wanted, and she refused to let them win. That night, Omi walked home slowly, her eyes wet with tears. The whole day had been heavy, with whispers chasing her everywhere she went. She felt small, unwanted, and so alone. As she turned the corner near the old village square, she heard a voice call softly, "Omi." She looked up and saw Elder Kanu, her late grandfather's closest friend. His face was kind, lined with years of wisdom, and he carried the calmness of someone who had seen many storms. "Omi, wait," he said gently, walking toward her. She wiped her tears quickly, trying to hide her pain, but Elder Kanu shook his head. "Do not hide from me, child. I knew your grandparents well. They loved you deeply. Omi's chest tightened at his words. She wanted to believe it, but after so many days of rejection and lies, it was hard. Elder Kanu reached into his cloth bag and pulled out a small wooden box, polished but old. He held it out with care. Your grandparents left this for you. They asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I believe that time has come. Omi's hands trembled as she accepted the box. She opened it slowly and gasped. Inside were papers neatly tied together, official documents signed and sealed, proving that every coin, every piece of land, every house her grandparents had left was meant for her alone. Not her parents. Not anyone else. Only Omi. Her eyes widened in shock. Elder Kanu placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke with a firm but gentle voice. Your grandparents saw the darkness in your parents long ago. They knew greed would blind them one day. That is why they secured everything in your name, with the law to protect it. They said to me, one day, she will need protection from her own blood. Omi felt her heart pound in her chest. The truth wrapped around her like a blanket, warm and comforting. She had thought her grandparents were gone forever, but in that moment, she realized their love was still alive, still guiding her. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were not only tears of pain, they were tears of relief. Elder Kanu looked at her with eyes full of kindness. Child, you are not alone. They gave you more than wealth. They gave you strength, wisdom, and a shield against those who wish to harm you. Do not let lies break you. Stand firm. You carry their light. Omi clutched the box tightly to her chest, feeling a wave of strength she had never felt before. For the first time in weeks, she lifted her head high. She was no longer the girl walking home in shame. She was the granddaughter her grandparents had believed in, the one they had trusted with everything. And in that moment, she knew she would never let their faith in her go to waste. Zako and Lyra's greed grew heavier with each passing day. They could not stand the sight of Omi walking confidently through the village while they struggled. So they plotted quietly, telling themselves they would outsmart her. They went to businessmen and lenders, boasting about their hidden wealth and their daughter's fortune. They signed papers in Omi's name, thinking no one would ever find out. They promised repayment with money they did not have. For a while, it looked like they had won. They dressed in fine clothes again, laughed loudly in public, and bragged as if nothing had changed. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already showing. Soon, the creditors came knocking. The first man shouted that their payments were late. The second dragged them to the market square, waving documents they had signed. And then the truth came out. Every deal, every signature, was tied to Omi's name. Yet when the lenders went to her, they discovered everything had been secured long ago. Omi had locked her inheritance tightly, following her grandparents' wishes. Nothing could be taken from her. And so all debts fell back on Zako and Lyra. The news spread like fire through the village. The very people who once bowed to Zako and Lyra now spat insults when they passed. Neighbors who had once eaten at their table slammed their doors shut. Their laughter turned to whispers of mockery. See how the mighty have fallen, women at the well said. They thought their daughter was weak, yet look who is begging now. Even children chased them, calling them names. Lyra's pride broke first. She sat outside Omi's gate, her wrapper torn, her eyes swollen from crying. Omi, my daughter, she begged, help us. You are our only hope. We were wrong. Please forgive us. But Omi stood tall, her face unreadable. She remembered every night of hunger, every cruel word, every time they had treated her like nothing. Slowly she shook her head. You never saved me when I cried, Omi said, her voice steady. You called me a curse, a burden. You pushed me away when I needed you the most. Now you will carry your own weight. These are the seeds you planted, and today you must eat their fruit. Zako, once so proud, lowered his head in shame. Lyra reached for Omi's hands, but Omi stepped back. The silence between them was heavier than any insult. The crowd that had gathered murmured in awe. The daughter they had mocked was now the strongest of them all. For the first time, Zako and Lyra realized the truth. Their downfall was not because of Omi's curse or stubbornness. It was because of their own greed. And now there was no one left to blame. No one left to save them. Only the weight of their choices, pressing down harder than ever. Omi stood outside the old family house, the same place where she had once cried herself to sleep as a little girl. But this time, her heart felt lighter than it had ever been. Her parents' voices no longer echoed in her mind, calling her useless, a burden, or unworthy. Those words had lost their power. She had seen with her own eyes how greed had stripped them of everything: their pride, their friends, and even their dignity. Life had punished them in ways she never could have planned. And so, instead of seeking revenge, she simply chose to walk away. She carried her grandparents' legacy with her, not just in the form of wealth, but in the quiet strength they had passed down to her. Every dollar, every document, every memory of their kindness reminded her that she had always been loved, even when her parents failed to show it. The box Elder Kanu gave her wasn't just proof of her inheritance. It was proof that she was never forgotten, never unwanted. Her grandparents had seen her worth long before the world did. And now Omi finally believed it too. Her parents, Zako and Lyra, sat in their broken pride, weighed down by debts they could no longer hide from. The same people who once mocked Omi now whispered about them in shame. Yet Omi did not look back in bitterness. She did not laugh at their downfall or throw her success in their faces. She simply lifted her chin, knowing life itself had written the ending for them. They had called her a burden, but now they were the ones carrying the heavy load of their own greed. For Omi, freedom didn't come from the $26 million sitting in her account. It came from finally letting go of the need to be accepted by people who were never capable of loving her the way she deserved. It came from knowing she could build her own life, on her own terms, with her grandparents' love guiding her every step. As she walked into her new beginning, she whispered softly to herself, "I am enough." And in that moment, Omi wasn't just rich, she was free. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away, share it. Would you forgive parents who chose greed over you? Or would you walk away like Omi? Tell me in the comments. Your voice matters. Subscribe for more emotional stories about family, betrayal, and self-worth. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply choosing yourself.